Welcome back to Pardon the Mess, a podcast about humorous, inspirational, and educational experiences presented by first-time moms trying to navigate parenthood while keeping our sanity. I'm your host, Brittany, and we have our co-host, Cody.
Hi.
And Jess.
Hey.
This is episode 3, and today we'll catch up with you, and then I'll share with you my story. So before we begin, I wanted to tell you guys about a trick that I learned since last week related to brushing teeth. It didn't work for my son, but it did work for my daughter, and it was sort of an accidental find. So I was leaning Swiss back on my lap and kissing her, like her chin or something like that, and she was laughing, and so her mouth was open, so I just took advantage of that. So my head's like down and I'm brushing, but it worked. But Buddy he just clamps down and doesn't want to get the toothbrush. So So there's a trick, and we talk about that in our last episode from last week's episode 2, so you can check that out if you haven't heard it yet. What's going on in our lives? Who wants to start?
I can start. So we talked about bedtime routines last week, and we are dealing with some serious sleep issues with Jamie right now. He is just going, I think he's a really good baby and he doesn't cry a whole lot. And so I'm learning about the different development stages that babies go through. And right around this time, he's supposed to do like a developmental leap, and which might make some babies cry more, be more fussy, be more needy or whatever. And he's not necessarily doing that, but he is just reducing a lot in his sleep. So he will nap now for like 30 to 45 minutes versus 1 to 2 hours. And then when he wakes up, he wants to eat. And he's eating more frequently, but in shorter increments, sleeping in shorter increments. So it's like, I can't do anything. I can't take a nap. So it has been a struggle, but I am looking forward to him getting a handle on it.
Get a grip.
Yeah.
Getting a handle on it.
Get it together, man. Mommy needs sleep. We are really, putting our foot down with the bedtime routine. We're being more diligent with it, hoping that will help calm him down. I implemented the bath. So thanks,
nice.
Cody.
Yeah.
We're starting to do the bath as well.
Let me know how it goes.
And that really is helping him because he loves the water. But one thing I wanted to mention in this struggle is that he also has learned to smile. So
that's awesome.
That is
Milestone.
the best. It is the best. And it's like totally forgives everything that he does. I can be just in the worst mood, no sleep at all. He slept for 20 minutes and he gets up and he's crying or whatever. And then I pick him up and he smiles and I'm just like, oh, okay. You're fine.
Is that why you feel rested? Did you smile before you left?
He was very smiley this morning. He was asleep when I left.
Oh,
so
okay.
Those are two wonderful things. And so I feel better today. But yeah, it is just the best.
So that science experiment that everyone talks about that, proves moms don't need sleep, it's working wildly on you.
Yes.
Through smiles and having
Yes, totally. I don't think I've gotten more than like a 2-hour span of sleep for the past almost a week.
Thank you for being here. Gosh, so sorry. We know.
Yes.
So did you say that is this age typical to have sleep regression, or is this just his individual?
Yeah, sleep regression I think is pretty common we might talk about this at some other point, but I am reading a book called Wonder Weeks, and we can link that on the website, and it is a great book, and it talks about like the different times, the different ages that infants go through developmental leaps, and right before they get that developmental leap, that milestone or those milestones or whatever, they can just become more cranky, more needy, and sleep regression can be part of that as well. Plus I think around 6 weeks they do a little bit of a sleep regression in addition, so I don't know which one of those it is. We'll see in another week or so. He may come out of this with learning some new skills, and then I'll definitely know that it's one of those developmental leaps. But it's good to know. It's good to read that book and be prepared. And I was prepared, and so it's a little bit less frustrating because I do know kind of what's going on with him.
Yeah, that is helpful. I feel like with Emmett, for but between months, 2 and 8 or 9, probably 9, he would get really good. Like, he would sleep and he'd be happy during the day, and then once it was like the minute that I felt really confident that we were in a good schedule, that it was like plummeting down to this like miserable terror of no sleep, crying all the time, wanting to nurse a lot but not very long, and then when I was like ready to be done and run away, that's when he started to get better, and I was like, this is the worst. Just be one kind of kid, because I need to decide if I like you or not. No, I do like him, but it was a lot of up and down, up and down.
Emotional roller coaster.
Yes.
He's like, it's like he could tell you're withdrawing. He's like, gotta do something cute.
Yeah.
I gotta come back. She's not gonna do this much longer. She's not gonna put
Literally packing her bag. So.
Yes. So also something that was funny from last week that I think we talked about was how Emmett does not sleep in bed with us. He's never been good at sleeping in bed with us. And just last night, he woke up around 11:15, I think, and I went in to feed him because he usually does wake up around that time. And then I laid him back down in bed, and he was just really struggling. He always plays with his hair, and so he would play with his hair and kind of like slow down, and then he'd wake back up and like fuss again and play with his hair. And so I just thought, I'm gonna go grab him and see if he'll settle down in bed. Like, I'll just snuggle him for a minute. And he came and totally fell asleep in bed with us. Wow. And I didn't sleep because I'm not used to it now. So I stayed up till like 2:30, and then he woke up and was not sleeping good with us again. So I put him in his bed. He slept great for the rest of the night in his bed. But I just thought it was crazy that life throws you curveballs. Again, when you finally think you're like, I know this for sure, that's when things change.
Never predictable.
Yep.
Yeah. I've been kind of struggling with kids not eating their food. Like, not finishing their food, but not wanting what you make. And I'm sure every parent has dealt with this at every age of child. But I don't know at what age you can start saying, well, that's what we're making, and you're not going to get another meal, or whatever, right? I feel like 1-year-old barely,
that's a tricky,
like barely on the sunrise of 1-year-old is a little young to do that, right? Especially when we're getting told at every turn, pretty much, or we have been for the majority of their life, to make sure they're getting in it as many calories as they can. You know, you should put butter on everything, kind of things. You know, like try and plump them up, and then being like, well, I mean, and so boundaries just aren't really, I feel like, I mean, they have to be realistic, right? And so my kids' time is, how do you put it, like a commodity? It's just too rare. And so when if I have, like, usually what I've tried to do, like when I'm on top of it, is when the kids are napping, I make the next meal, and then I either have it, if it's close enough to when they'll wake up, I'll have it warm, like I'll overheat it, and then I'll let it cool down, or I'll like have it in the fridge ready or whatever. And so if I took the time, my precious break time, to make them freaking food, and then they're like leaning over their high chair and dropping it, it makes me upset, to say the least. But not only upset, like in a mad way, like concerned, because I'm not, I mean, obviously kids they're fickle, right? Like my mother-in-law once said, she was watching the kids and she was saying, they don't like peas. And I said, what? They love peas. And so, you know, in her perception, like that time, they were totally against it, but they've never been that way. They just love them. And so sometimes they do that. So I don't know if you listeners have any tips for that. Obviously, I can't tell them, sorry, you're going to go to bed without any dinner. But, you know, how do I, like, deal with that? Like, it takes more time. And if they're screaming and on a really bad day, I don't know. And Jess or Cody, if you have any thoughts on that, because I know that Emmett's barely getting into solids. I mean, not barely, but he's not eating it primarily.
He's finally, like, eating whatever we eat with table food. Yeah, we have to cut up smaller. And I haven't experienced a ton of that with him yet. But I've experienced it with my niece and nephew that I used to watch a lot. And from what I've learned from Kids Eat in Color, this is just some tips that she said. Always give them something that you're pretty confident they're going to like. One thing that they can eat, right? And then some new things. And I think I'm lucky with Emmett where if he's not hungry, he just stops eating. He's not really a food thrower that I've noticed. I don't know, you may have.
No, he's not. Yeah. You're right, yeah.
Yeah, he'll just kind of like put his hands up and like be like, I'm done, I don't know. And so that's one nice thing, because my policy and my philosophy with him so far has been, if he's not eating the food, he's not hungry.
Right.
And if I'm not hungry, like, I don't ever want to have the policy in my house that you have to eat the food in front of you. Right. Because that, I just think that was a policy in my house, and it led to some unhealthy relationship with food where I feel like I have to finish everything on my plate even if I'm full. And so kids are going to go through times where they're not hungry because their body is not growing as much. And in those times and it's hard to identify. I don't know. I'm just giving you my thoughts, but it's so tricky. It's such a tricky and complicated subject.
Recently
I was just going to say, I don't know exactly when, but there has to be some cognitive development, some age where they're aware of the consequence of not eating. I want to say that it's like around 3 or 4 years old, but that's just totally a guess off the top of my head. But I'm sure there's some scientific, maybe we should look it up and do an episode on.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's something where they can cognitively understand, like, this is what I have to eat. If I don't eat this, I won't eat and I'll be hungry. But I know that right now is not there. 1-year-old is too young.
Yeah, for sure.
But good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and if anybody has tips on how I can reduce my stress on that, on particularly when they're freaking out. I mean, I guess I'm not really sure what anybody could say, because I've had good days and I've had bad days, and I've had days that I feel like totally confident despite that pattern of like, and this doesn't happen a lot. Usually they eat what I give. Like, they're really good eaters, but the other day they were not wanting anything. It was, I wonder if they're going through a growth spurt or something, because they were just, they ate what we gave them really quick, or they threw it off the high chair. I can't remember now, but I remember it was like screaming time screaming. Like, it was just crazy. And then I was like, oh my gosh, Phil, just get them something. Give them yogurt. I think they want yogurt. And they were as happy as can be. We had the best pictures from that. Just total heaven. And I'm like, what was with yogurt? They like it, but, you know, why is it, you know what I'm trying to say? So it was just frustrating.
Maybe some meal prep, like once a week, prep a bunch of things that will keep, and then you can prep, you know, during the nap times or whatever a little bit more, but then you'll at least have some things cut up and ready
like
to give
on
them.
hand.
Yeah.
I also, another thing that I saw on Kidsy in Color was talking about different nutrients that your kids may be needing, and how our body tells us like what we're hungry for based on things that we're needing. So there may have been something in that yogurt that they're like, oh, I'm wanting this right now because my body's telling me I'm lacking in whatever it is. Right. You know, do they need more probiotics or vitamin C, I think, is in yogurts? I don't know.
It could be, but whatever
it is, yeah. And she I remember her posting something and saying, for lunch, my son ate a lot of his protein and not any of his vegetables. And now at dinner, he's eating a lot of his vegetables and he left his protein. And it's hard. I would never be able to keep track of that because my head is just 1,000 places. But in my heart, I'm just like, okay, my son is learning his hunger cues. He's developing his relationship with food, and that needs to be him. Like, that can't be me pushing it on him. Right. So if he wants to eat this thing at this time and not eat this other thing on his plate, that's okay. Yeah. You know, there's no regulations with how or what he should be eating. I think I always try to find something from a variety of different food groups. So like I'll try to have a fruit on his plate and a vegetable on his plate and some type of meat and maybe like a grain or a carbohydrate of some kind, and see how he does with that. And it's always different what he eats.
I do know from raising my sister that variety is really important. And I think I've seen a lot of correlation with parents who don't have a lot of variety in their diet, and then kids kind of follow suit. Mm-hmm. But if you have just experiment with things, just, you know, we were talking about quinoa the other day. Just like make some quinoa and give it to them, see how they react. And then in addition to that, keep trying. Like you're saying that one day they didn't like peas. Well, a couple of weeks later, they may love it, whatever it is, and they hated it. They may love it later, or vice versa. So variety, and just keep sticking with it. Yeah,
like that. We had that experience with pears. We gave them pears. Whenever they could start first eating solids. You know, 7. I think they didn't start solids until they're 8 months. So it was around their 8, maybe 9 months. So they then like 6-ish months later, they've had some pears that were a different kind of pear. I think the first time was a Bartlett pear, and this was It was red in color on the skin. Might have been a red pear. I don't know if that's what they're called. Yeah, but it was, I remember thinking that the Bartlett pear was awfully hard, and I think it was underripe or something. So there was difference in textures as well, but they just really liked it, and I thought, yeah, like you said, trying again is really important. So I think in that, what I shared is kind of like it was a bad time, but fortunately it's not always that way. And I think that might be one of my key takeaways, like to remind myself, like, it's not always this way. It's not always this way. Just make sure that I can do what I need to do to keep my cool. And, and usually what I do is give them a bowl of yogurt and let them get it all over themselves, and it's great. And everyone except my husband is happy.
Yeah. It's funny how those are the times that stick with you, though.
Yeah.
Like, the one time that my son reacts poorly to something, I'm like, what? I'm failing. I am a failure forever.
Yeah.
And Ian's like, wait. My husband is like, this happened once. He has never done this. And I'm like, but he did it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you're doing good. You're doing a good job.
Thank you. So I'm going to share about my story. We're each going to share our story related to motherhood during this season. And if after you hear the podcast, if you have other questions, you can feel free to email us. Our email is on our website, and then also if you connect with us on Instagram, you can DM us. In all of our experiences, these are things that we experienced or information that we gained during it, and so we're a specialist as far as our experiences go, but we really want to be able to help other people in as much as we can and connect and help people feel the understanding that they're not alone in their experience. So hopefully something that we share can resonate with you. So when I was first married, my husband and I hadn't decided when we were going to have kids. We never really could get on the same page. And at the beginning, I didn't even know if I wanted to have kids. I mean, it was sort of one of those, like, it's probably a good idea. I think in my heart that it's going to happen, but I wasn't like, let's get started right away or let's wait a certain period of time. I just was like, let's see how it goes. And I wonder if that was partly a coping mechanism, because a lot of things in my life, like everyone's lives, but a lot of things in my life went drastically different than I expected. Like, I was married a lot later than I expected. I had some weird relationships, and that's never expected, like before I got married. And so, when I got married and we were talking about having kids, we both just kind of agreed that it was probably going to happen, but we weren't like really eager to change our lifestyle, and we understood enough about kids that it wasn't going to be able to be the same, right? So shortly after I was married, I was at a meeting where I had heard a speaker speak about hormone and gut health, and he was talking about how sometimes that can be connected to infertility. And he sees a lot of women that are struggling with fertility, and they do blood work and analyze all that, and they can end up some of the time figuring out what the issue is and adjusting, and they can get pregnant. And it got me thinking that though we weren't talking about having kids, I had no idea really what my body was doing, because I never really went to the doctor unless, like, oh, my face fell off. Oh, man, better check that out. Like something drastic happens. Like, better go look at that. So I knew the concepts of, like, having regular checkups, and I had, like, appointments with my OB, like, every 3 years or something like that. So I was okay, but I did the minimum necessary. I figured when we were going to have kids, we would just try and then have kids, right? That's what, because isn't that what we're told when we're teenagers? Don't have sex, you'll get pregnant. So when I heard Dr. Lindell speak, I was like, oh, maybe I should make sure that things work.
Yeah.
So I went to his office, met with one of his practitioners, and they did some blood work, and they learned that my levels were just crazy. Like, my thyroid was really low. The candida in my gut was really high. I think it said my candida, I think, was supposed to be like 0.9, and it was like in the 20s. And so,
Whoa.
like, that gives you any kind of,
Wow.
So it was really high, and so like average was supposed to be 1. And I learned a lot about, like, what was going on. And what was great about this is that none of this had to do with fertility. I mean, it might later have affected, but all of it was just like regular person stuff. Like, you need to have if you want to be a happy, healthy person, you need to adjust all this stuff.
So were you experiencing anything like health-wise as a result of that you can look back now and say, oh yeah, I was feeling, really crappy, and then, like what kind of things came about besides fertility things from visiting him and getting that straightened out?
Well, let me say one thing first that I realized connected. So they said that sugar and yeast, like if you eat bread, at least glutinous bread. I mean, I know that gluten-free bread has yeast in it too, but they particularly mentioned like wheat can feed the candida, and then the candida leads to feelings of like anxiety, depression, irritability, general sadness. So I was like, oh, that's why I've been feeling really irritable as far back as I can remember. I've always been kind of an anxious child, which, I mean, we could like psychoanalyze that forever, right? But I've also had a pretty crappy diet, like forever. Like I said, anxiety was still just kind of with me. I've never been on medication for it, so I don't know that I would say it's, what's a word for like really bad?
Clinical?
Yeah, clinical. Yeah, I was gonna
like
say
a
persistent. Severe, yeah. It was just probably mild anxiety. But did that answer what you were saying? Like,
yeah.
That, yeah, okay.
I also think it's so interesting that you went to the doctor before experiencing infertility. I rarely hear, I have a lot of friends and family who have experienced infertility, and never have I heard of someone going in before trying to have a baby and not being able to conceive. And so I just think that's a unique part of your story.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I'm like, thank you.
I was good.
Thank you for pointing it out. So, and it's funny because the reason I went is because I kind of am a little bit of a control freak. Like, I wanted to control all the variables. I didn't want to be surprised, and I didn't want to be like subjected to disappointment. I wanted to have like X amount of time to prepare and just be like, okay, this is my life. This is how it is. I wanted to like minimize discomfort by like finding out all the answers, which is not helpful. Like, it's unhealthy. I feel like I'm working on that, but it was really good. So it was kind of interesting how like probably frankly unhealthy behavior or thought pattern led me to finding out these things that were really important. And I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't have gone in. Like, I don't know if it would have gotten worse. I don't know. But I was really emotional. I went to this conference in the 2 weeks after I got my blood work drawn, and it's a default behavior for me and my coworkers. We would go to these conferences and bring as much junk food as we could, like to power through, I guess, or something. Yeah. Even though we were like, yay, we get to go to these conferences and like be away from work, but then we ate like that was gonna keep us alive, I mean, but not nutritiously. And I just kept eating this crap food, and I was like, it was like I wasn't satiated, like I just kept feeling like I needed that comfort. And then when I came back 2 weeks later, and they analyzed and they explained about my candida and all these levels that I'm talking about, they explained that like the sugar feeds it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like mind blown that I was like feeding the candida, I don't know, it was almost like a black hole. And so that was just so interesting. So I went on this like 30-day, this is a little bit separate, but I just think it's interesting, and so I wanted to share it in case that helps anyone else. I went on this 30-day, it was supposed to be like a sugar detox, and I don't remember if I was 100%, but I was pretty close. Like, I think I might have had a starburst or something like that during it.
How dare you?
So I know you need to be like totally, like free of it to really be good at this. But it was interesting. They even gave me like, they were like, you're gonna feel some things, like some irritability as you like, and they quote unquote prescribed, because it was like a supplement that wasn't really a prescription. They're like, get some charcoal, and I was like, briquettes? Like, no.
I would think the same. Get some charcoal.
Yeah. So,
in case
yeah.
you want to grill and
Yeah. I was like, eat meat instead of sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So that's a supplement. Yeah. So it was really interesting.
In case you want to eat meat.
Like I just told you, I like to know all the answers before. And so I was like, okay, I've got this information and I'm like learning these other things about myself, but I still don't know like anything about myself like fertility wise, and like I felt like it was a little bit precarious to like figure that out by like I didn't know how to do that without like accidentally getting pregnant, you know, like I didn't know how to like track anything. And I have a friend and she had a book, I can't remember the name of it, but I'm gonna link it so you'll see it in our show notes, but she had a book that talked about how to track your, and if you know about it, if this rings a bell, you might know, but anyway, how to track your cycle and just fertility generally naturally. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but there was just a bunch of ways that you could like test your like use a thermometer or different things like that.
Basal body temperature.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah. So anyway, I was looking into that and I was like, it was either I didn't know how to read the results or I wasn't getting the results, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I decided to talk to Dr. Lundell, and I had explained that I wasn't really sure like about my cycle, and it's a little bit fuzzy, this part, but I just remember we were talking about that and we were going to do some blood work, but I needed to do it on a particular day of my cycle. But I never reached that day. I kept bleeding before. And I was like, I felt kind of like a failure. Like I was like, couldn't like do this test or the blood work, testing, whatever, you know. And so we talked about it and figured out something, and it ended up being that we still ended up doing the blood work at a certain time, but he deduced through his like magic doctor reading powers that I wasn't even ovulating. And I was trying to explain this to Phil, and he's like, I don't understand. And I was like, I don't either. All I know is the doctor said to do this, and I took the test, and this is what he did do. So I don't know how he figured it out. But people that know more about like levels and stuff, that might make more sense.
Well, and that would be why the basal body temperature tracking wasn't working for you either,
Yeah.
because it is the ovulation that triggers your temperature to increase.
Oh yeah.
And even though
interesting,
it's not super accurate, it's a good method. I did it for a very long time, but I'll talk about on my episode, I wasn't ovulating either, and so it wasn't doing anything. But it's very difficult to do. You have to do it like at the same time every morning. They even recommend like before you move out of bed, like before you get up to pee, to take your temperature.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not ovulating, if you don't have a regular cycle or whatever, that information isn't really going to do you any good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
How come you didn't? I'm just curious. So I bought this ovulation test kit at Walmart where I would pee on a thing, I'd stick it in it, and it would give me like blank face for not ovulating and like smiley face or like some kind of face for your hormones are rising, and then like super happy face for this is the ideal window to ovulate. Did you know about that or? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And actually, I can't remember if it was before or after. I didn't know about that. I think I knew about strips, but I didn't know. I had a friend that let me use some, but they said that, so I didn't know about a lot of stuff, like those options. You know, I knew about condoms and I knew about things like that, but I didn't know about like
basic high school sex education is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly, you know. And I like knew about, I had been on a thing.
IUD?
Yes, thank you. I'm like gesturing, trying to
Just so you all know, Brittany was just doing some weird finger gestures that could have been taken a lot of ways. But
you got it.
You guys
Like-
should be on a team,
like a peace
charades.
sign, kind of, just pushing up. I don't.
You're like a T. Yeah. Where you should be my partner every time we need to do, what is that, gestures or gestures?
Yes, I got you.
I'm like doing like baseball signs. Anyway, yeah, good job. Yeah, I was on an IUD before, and then like I had gotten it out because I was like, oh, maybe we should like be open to the idea of it. So during this whole time, we weren't on like birth control.
You weren't preventing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had used an ovulation, like that you just pee on, but it didn't give me any kind of like faces or instructions. I don't even remember if the instructions were in English because I was like, what am I reading? And I was like, is this expired? Do they expire? You know, I just wasn't even sure what I was working with. And I even remember leaving it on the toilet, and I knew what it was. And so I didn't like worry about it. And Phil sent me a text asking if we should talk about it. And I said, no. That's all he said. Poor guy. He's like, well, why not? Is this a pregnancy? And I knew it didn't look like a pregnancy test, but then I learned from another friend of ours that there are pregnancy tests that are just like little things you dip in. See, I know nothing. So I'm like, no.
Poor Phil.
Get
Did he
off
have like
me.
a heart attack
I
or
know.
something?
And like leave it out for him to find.
Yeah.
Not stress about it. Anyway, so I didn't know, until I did this blood work that I wasn't ovulating. I was it was weird. So since we weren't on the same page about having kids at that time, I was like, we maybe could kind of work up to it, like sneak up on ourselves or something, not commit. And Phil was like, that was the answer I got, pretty much, just kind of like nothing.
Sneak up on it.
Yeah, I know. So
good strategy.
I know. And I think it's because I was like afraid of committing. I didn't want to like choose to have kids and then be like, this sucks. And it's like, well, you did it to yourself. And I'm like, I hate my life. I just didn't want to I think I just wasn't ready for that kind of accountability or something. I don't know, if we're being real. I think that was it. And so I came home and I told Phil the results, and I feel like this is going to paint Phil in a bad light, but I want you guys to understand kind of a little bit more about the dynamic about like our relationship at the time. And so I told him, I was like, well, you should be happy. I can't even ovulate. Isn't that great? And he was like, well, geez, don't like put it like that. So it was weird. Like we had to try and figure out like what we really felt about it. It was kind of sad, but like I was almost relieved, like, cool, we don't have to even use like protection if I'm not ovulating, right? So time went on. We kind of adjusted through like taking in that information, and my doctor's office had told us about Clomid, and I was like, Clomid, again, knew nothing. Like I was like processing it. I was just like, there's this thing that we can take, and Phil's like, oh, I don't know if I want to like how much will it like make us pregnant? I'm like, well, it doesn't make us pregnant.
How much will it make us pregnant?
On a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, a scale 1 to 10 kids, because spoiler, we didn't know. So I'm going to share if I thought I was the last person on earth to understand Clomid, but in case you also are in that camp, I'm going to read some information that I gathered about Clomid. Some of the stuff I learned a few days ago. Like, I didn't know this from my doctor. So,
oh no.
Yeah. And I don't know if they just didn't like tell me or if they thought that I knew because I was like, yeah, I did some research or what. But they, so this is from UpToDate.com. And I'll just read you some of the things it said about Clomid. Women who are most likely to respond to clomiphene, Clomid is the brand name, I think. Is that okay? Sorry, I before I continue this, I wanted to clarify that my doctor didn't suggest I take Clomid for infertility, which like 100% of the time is what I've heard other people take it for. They said to take it to help me get my cycle regular. I had heard my friend who was trying to conceive say that she was on Clomid. So I had heard that, but I didn't like piece it together as like a fertility drug. Going back to UpToDate.com, it says, women who are most likely to respond to clomiphene include those with polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS. In women who ovulate irregularly, approximately 80% who take clomiphene will ovulate, and 30 to 40% of all women who take clomiphene become pregnant. So, realistically, my desire in taking clomiphene or Clomid was simply to regulate my period. My doctor's office did say, make sure you take this when you're ready to get pregnant. So I feel like that was pretty highlighted. But like I said, I know a lot of women who didn't.
Clomid also increases your chances of having multiples.
Surprise!
Yes.
Also not said until, how do you feel about twins? Was what a different doctor's office asked me, and I said, sounds like a pretty cool idea. Well, why do you ask? Not piecing
They're
it
nice.
together.
Twins are nice.
I know. So can we get back to my baby?
Yeah.
That's what I had thought.
My one, right? One.
Yeah. So the risks, like you said, it says on the website, UpToDate.com, include slightly increased rate of multiple pregnancies. Approximately 6% of women who use clomiphene have twins. 6.
That's 6% of the 30 to 40%.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of small.
Yeah. When I did get pregnant, at the beginning of my pregnancy, I experienced quite a bit of pain and some bleeding, and I didn't know. My understanding of pregnancy is that there should be 0% bleeding, so any was significant. I'm kind of like a trial and error person, I guess, with all this. Like, despite me wanting to know all the answers before, I didn't like really look up anything about once you get pregnant. I just kind of was like, yeah, like went to the doctor, found out these things, and then was given Clomid, and then got pregnant, didn't really like know anything else. My pain was kind of like super cramping. I mean, it was like stabbing. It was like worse than a really bad period for me. And so I saw my doctor at 6 weeks along, and she confirmed everything was okay. She even said, it looks like there's twins, but there's not. It's just seeing like through the placenta, like the angles or the lighting or something like that. And I was like, okay. And I was even showing somebody the ultrasound and was like, it looks like twins, but it's not. And they're like, oh, okay. I had more pain and bleeding at 7 weeks, and that was even worse. So I went in, and I had thought that I miscarried at 6 weeks. And then I was actually on a trip, and I was like, well, I'm bleeding. I must be miscarrying. And I like didn't know what to feel about it. I didn't know anything. I hadn't gone to the doctor yet. So I was like trying to protect myself, I think, and I wasn't overly emotional about it. I was like, this is how women feel when they're miscarrying, I guess. Like, I didn't really feel much. I just kind of was, like, trying to explore my feelings. Meanwhile, Phil he didn't know we were pregnant at this time. And that was the hardest part for me, is that I didn't, like, feel like I could join. I think it was until I told him, I didn't feel like I could feel much about it. I just was like, this is how you feel when you're pregnant. And then at 7 weeks, when I went in, they confirmed everything was okay. And then my doctor was like, that's when she said, how do you feel about twins? And I was like, clueless. And then she went and got her partner, who was like really experienced in this, and he confirmed. So I was like, oh, maybe I should tell my husband we're pregnant. So
real quick, was there any particular reason you didn't tell him for, like, how long did you wait before you told him?
7 weeks.
No, like, since you knew.
Oh, since 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why did you wait?
Yeah, good question. So he had midterms coming up, and I was afraid that he would just, like, think about that through his midterms and be really distracted, especially because we hadn't decided to have kids. We just snuck up on ourselves. My
Your
plan
strategy
worked.
worked.
Yeah, I know. It's like, let's pretend we can't have kids, and then just... Anyway, right after his midterms, he was going to a really good friend's wedding, and I was afraid that he would just be like, distracted. I don't want to, like, tell anybody. And I even remember at the wedding being like, we went to, it's like bourbon town. Everything was bourbon there. Kentucky, Louisville, and everything, like chocolates and everything. Yeah, they're like really well known for like yeah, I know. Well, they like, it's like a big deal over there. So we had a chocolate, and I was like, oh no, shoot, can I have this? Nobody knew I was pregnant except for my doctor and me. But I was there with some of Phil's friends, and I was like, so what if I was pregnant? Do you think that would like hurt the baby, me having this chocolate? And they're like, are you pregnant? I'm like, no.
Smooth, Brittany. Real smooth.
Yeah.
But what if? Let's just play different. Let's play out different scenarios. This will be fun.
Yeah, so
I needed to follow it up with like another, like, what if I were a boy?
Would this affect me differently?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I came back, and they confirmed it was twins, and I told Phil, and I just started, seeing the doctor, having my regular checkups. She referred me over to the maternal fetal medicine clinic. She tracked me, and I felt really glad that I could go there because I got to see my kids through ultrasounds a lot more than most people. And I don't know if a lot of people want to have ultrasounds, but for me that was kind of nice. But something during the pregnancy is I couldn't see or feel Buddy much, and I had been told that I had an anterior placenta. I am going to link a little bit more about anterior placenta so you can read about that if you're in that situation and you're not as familiar. That I did link something I found about that, but it's just that there's like a thicker wall there. It's harder to feel kicks and things like that. She was really great, helped me make a birth plan and kind of guided me. She gave me a lot of like information that I should consider, and that was really great. And my plan was to have a vaginal birth, unmedicated, if possible. Sounded like a good idea. It seemed like the best
That's the thing,
case
right?
scenario.
Like,
Yeah, I was like...
I don't know, maybe that's just the popular thing, because I do know people who don't want that. But.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
it's
it's
pretty
the most
popular.
common.
Yeah.
Most, I don't know, like, what's...
Well, not pushed by the doctors. I
No.
feel like they're like,
What's
would you...
promoted, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
What's promoted is the best ideal
Yeah.
way to birth.
Yeah.
Bring life into the world.
And so, but I knew that I might have to have a C-section. There's a good chance. And so I was okay with it. Like, I didn't feel like it made me any less of a mom or any of that. Like, I wasn't emotionally bothered about having a C-section. I really didn't want and this is why I didn't want to do medicated, is because I just don't like needles. And I mean, like, I've gotten used to getting blood drawn, and I've gotten used to getting shots, but I didn't want a needle in my back. Super not cool with that. And so I was like, well, then I guess I'm just going to do an unmedicated delivery. And they're like, well, you can't do that with a C-section very comfortably. And I was like, So when it came time, my water broke, which I don't know how common that is, but I've met a lot of people who haven't had that experience. So I felt glad that I was able to experience that. Unfortunately, I was at home. I worked till the day I delivered, but I had stopped at home on the way to a client's home and used the potty, and my water broke. So good timing. And we made our way to the hospital. Phil came home from work, and they said that baby A, who's my daughter, was in a position that they would have to do a C-section. And I was pretty upset, again, not because of the C-section, but because I'd have to be numbed. And numbing is, like, super freaky to me. It's just rough. It's like a thing in my head, I guess. I don't know. So I just felt this was, like, the hardest part of my pregnancy. Like, I felt so anxious. I don't know, like, off the charts, you know? Like, I just felt like it would be better to just die than to just go through whatever. Like, my anxiety was just crazy. And I couldn't do any preparation for that. Despite all the preparation that I did, like breathing or whatever, like, it was just so intense. And my sweet doula was like, remember what we talked about? Remember you and Phil thought we were going to think about happy times, and we're like, we didn't prepare. Like, we just...
Well, and you didn't mention this, I don't think, but this was a month before their due date as well.
Right, exactly, 1 month, yeah. And that's partly why, you know, I didn't have any health restrictions. I wasn't required to be not working. But, like, people ask, like, why are you still working? I'm like, because I feel pretty good. Like, my pregnancy was really good in comparison. Like, yeah, it was uncomfortable. I don't think that it's fair for anyone except the pregnant woman to state how her pregnancy was. And I think that despite all that, it was probably pretty good. Like I said, I was able to exercise until, like, 30 weeks, I think. I mean, I wasn't loving it, but I was able to move enough that I felt like I could, like, twice a week or something. And then I worked up until delivery. So when I was in that moment, it was just too much for me. But it was crazy town. And my doctors were so sweet. They were like, you were concerned. And Phil's like, you were nutso. He was like, you were so escalated. And they're like, and you had every right to be. I'm like, great bedside manners. Phil, learn. No, he was really sweet. He tried so hard to be comforting. But anyway, so they put me under general anesthesia because it was crazy. And I wasn't, like, doing anything dangerous. I wasn't, like, ripping those little paper things off, like, trying to run away. But I was, like, just trying to calm myself, and it wasn't working. So they put me under, and it was great. I was sad that that's the case, like, that I was so anxious that I wasn't, like, able to be calm about it. But I was happy to have not been awake. I feel like you just gotta go with what's best. And that was what was best for me. And then when I came out, when I was so tired, which who isn't, right, after delivering, and they asked me if I'd like to see my kids, and I said, no, I'd like to sleep. And they were like, okay, and I don't know how long they let me. And then they said, we really need, because I'd said that I wanted to nurse soon after, which this is pretty consistent with, like, me as a person. Like, if you wake me up and I'm still tired, I'm not gonna, like, care about anything but going back to sleep. So that's probably, my brain was like, sleeping. So I just eventually said, well, you really need to nurse, and that worked out. And then, you know, it became the long saga of never sleeping again. So, yeah. And so after I left the hospital, when I was at home, something that I wasn't expecting was I had a lot of night sweats. Did either of you experience that?
No.
No?
I'll have to think about it.
I know it's a common.
Did you? Yeah, I didn't know, because when I looked up and I read that online, it said postpartum night sweats happen because of low levels of estrogen, levels of hormones, including estrogen, change as the woman's body adjusts to not being pregnant anymore, which made sense. It continued, the body releases two key hormones called progesterone and estrogen in large amounts during pregnancy. Changes in these hormone levels can promote an increase or decrease in body temperature. Women may also sweat more after pregnancy to get rid of excess fluids. According to the American Pregnancy Association, a woman's body takes on 50% more blood and bodily fluids during pregnancy to support the baby's growth. This fluid is no longer useful after birth, and the body gets rid of it through sweat and urine. So both of these may increase after childbirth. All these things were happening, like bleeding in the beginning and then super profuse sweating, and I was just like, oh, I'm so attractive. I don't know anybody personally that's said this, like, to me, but I've heard people say that they think that maternity leave is a vacation. I can't even describe the face to you guys. Like,
Who said
Let's bring
that,
that person
and
on
how are
right
they
now.
still alive?
no joke.
Like-
Have they
you
ever
know?
taken it?
Yeah,
Was it
like-
they did.
It is far from that. You know, you have all these, like, your body's like in this extreme detox, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And without your consent, like, you have no control. Just like your body grows, like, you can feed yourself nutritious foods and you can do all these things to support your body, but if you're impregnated and it's gonna succeed, it's gonna go. And just like afterward, like, you deliver and your body just kind of takes over, or you have a C-section and it's taken out, and then you do all this detox and stuff like that, and it's a lot for your body and mind.
I remember describing it to people as like, you finish running a marathon and you like cross the finish line. They're like, all right, next marathon. And I'm like, no, like, I cannot do another. I'm supposed to be done. This marathon is supposed to be over, right? Like, I reached the finish line and they're like, different kind of marathon.
Yeah.
And it still is hard. Like,
Yeah.
equally as hard in a lot of different ways.
You get to walk this one for the rest of your life.
This marathon never ends.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I wanted to talk about a couple of things that were hard for me, but it's going back a little bit. So during my pregnancy, it was difficult when people want to talk to me only because I was pregnant, and then with twins. It was people that I worked with who wouldn't stop in my office ever. I mean, they'd be cordial, fine, whatever, but they would never come to my office and stop by. And it's interesting because I know, and we might talk about this later, like the difference in preferences. And I was like, like, I wasn't really like enthused to be talking. I was like, I know why you're here. I know. Instead of being like, yeah, this is awesome, let's talk about my babies, I'm like, I'm still a person. I'm still me. Like, it was so hard for me
It's
to
like
have that.
the hot topic, like you're a zoo exhibit or something,
Yes.
and everyone just feels entitled to come and view your exhibit and talk to you about it and
Yeah.
be involved, which, yeah, that happened to me too. And
Yeah.
there's like lots of people, and I'm, an introverted person in general, but lots of people that I'm like, you would not ever have talked to me if you didn't know this. And now all of a sudden you know all of this stuff and want to tell me about it and talk to me about it. It's a weird experience.
I really just wanted my identity to be intact, and that was like, I was like desperately clawing, to hold on to that. So I think that's what made me resentful, not toward them as much as toward anybody else, where I was like, how about asking me how I'm doing, not how are you doing? Like, it's like, and there's so many crazy things that we think when we're pregnant, right? I mean, like, irrational things, of varying degrees. And so I think a lot of it was me being hormonal, but that was really hard for me, just my identity feeling like, now I'm gonna be their mom, I don't matter anymore, I'm just gonna be this big milk bucket, hopefully, if they work, who knows, like, I just always, so that was, and then, I'd be asked questions like that I don't feel like people with singletons get asked. Like, when I got really close to delivering, people would say, like, how big are they? I'm like, I don't know. Or how big are they gonna be? Is what I think I was asked. And I was like, I don't know. Like, and because I wanted to know the answers, I'd feel like really insecure, and I'd be like, oh, I don't know. Or people would say, like, you can't fit anybody or twins in there. You're so small, which I didn't mind the first time. But then, like, at the end of one day, the first day, I was like, I don't know how to respond. It was all me. Honestly, like, these things were just weird for me to process. Like, I didn't know how to respond without feeling like a jerk. So I would just be like, I'm gonna be a jerk, I guess. Like, I just didn't know, and it was stressful for me. It just felt very anxiety inducing. And I'm not implying, like, in saying any of this, if you know somebody with twins, I'm not saying that you have to, like, tiptoe around them. This is all Brittany. However, saying you've got your hands full, they've heard it. Don't say that.
I feel like, for me, I love talking about the experience with people who are genuine.
Yeah.
Like, even people who I didn't know super well, like Cody and I knew each other, but we weren't really great friends, but we would talk about my fertility experiences. And when I got pregnant, Cody was like one of the very first people that knew, just because she asked me about it.
That's awesome.
But I loved that. I absolutely loved that. But yeah, it was the people that came up and just kind of asked those same generic things. Like, they just kind of wanted to be involved, maybe didn't know anything else about me, so they didn't know what else to say or whatever. It was that was a little bit awkward to me. So my advice to anyone who does want to be involved with someone who is pregnant or pregnant with twins and you don't know them very well is to just be genuine and just care about them. And it'll come naturally to you and you may become better friends with them. But yeah, that was, for me, it was just, they needed to really care and not just be like a sideshow freak. You know what I mean?
And I think if you're close enough that you feel like you can have a vulnerable conversation with them, telling them, like, I don't know what to say to you, how can I support you? I feel like that would go a long way with me. But I'm also like a talk it out kind of person, and I feel like that is good for me. So, you kind of know your audience. I think that's good. Some other difficult things for me were during my pregnancy, I got used to looking how I looked, like if I got ready or not got ready. Like, I was confident enough, and I was just like, this is how I am. The world can adjust.
Yeah.
When I delivered, I was like kind of the same way. I felt like, okay, well, it's just a matter of survival at this point, but I just didn't love not having more control over that. Like, I could choose if I wanted to get ready when I was pregnant, but when I was recovering, I felt like I just looked gross all the time, and I couldn't really do anything about it. But it kind of ties into that, like, how your body's different, and it should be celebrated for what it did, but it's kind of, like, hard for people to feel that way, especially maybe even the mom. And so that was a difficult thing for me. I think I like logically convinced myself, like, you love yourself and what you did and it'll be fine. But it was difficult to sustain that, And then fortunately though, like when it came to exercising, I understood like, wait, X amount of time. I think it was like 6 weeks. And some people say with C-section, sometimes it can be longer, but my doctor said I was fine. But I wasn't doing very well. And my sister-in-law actually reminded me that she'd been told by somebody that when your placenta detaches from the uterus, that there's like a wound there, and she reminded me, like, and you have these 2 wounds, and that they need to heal. So even if you're like told you're okay to go exercise, that you have these wounds, whether the babies came out C-section or out your woohoo, you're definitely gonna need to recover, and you need to give yourself some grace. And I was like, I can't handle this like invisible grace requirement. Like, I need to see something, I need to, like, if you have like a scab, you can like see it's progressing and healing and stuff like that.
You did have like a huge incision.
You're right, but it was like healed pretty well, right? That's why I mean, like, internally though, it wasn't as much, and so that's why I was like, I hate this, and it was easy for me to like beat myself up a bit and be like, say less than kind things, because I was really worried about my identity being lost and that I'd feel like I was losing my own identity, not just how it's perceived. I really wanted to get out, and I was really grateful for both of you two for babysitting after. Like, I was able to get out more than we did before I was pregnant, even just to help me, be out of the house. I think it really helped stave off any, like, postpartum depression or anything like that, being able to have that, especially because it was the winter. I was afraid of that as well. Even though Phil was home for some time for paternity leave, it was, like, as you know, going back to having your spouse go back to work, that was really good for me, even though we had that time, there was still a lot of, for me, a scare about, like, I don't know how I'm going to be when he goes back, and what if I'm really, like, mentally unhealthy? And fortunately, I was okay. And I think it was just because, though, I had a lot of those things. And like I said, I prepared in my life before I got pregnant and then after I was pregnant. But, like, during pregnancy, I was kind of like, woo, let's just see what happens, I guess. I don't really know how to prepare.
There is this idea that, well, I mean, it's not an idea, it's real. Pregnancy is natural. Yeah. And childbirth is natural. And I think a lot of people don't put in the effort to research what's actually happening with your body, because they're just like, oh, well, people do this every day and it's natural and it'll be fine, whatever it is. And then something happens and it can totally rock your world. If you don't know what's going on with your body, you can think you're dying, especially during childbirth. Right. I mean, it's amazing to me the number of people who don't know what's happening during the childbirth process and how important it is, like, especially for vaginal deliveries, because there are many stages of that, to know kind of what your body's doing. It's so, so helpful to do that research and learn what's going on. But it is natural and it will be okay. And there are medical professionals or midwives or whoever you've chosen to help you with it. They know what's going on. But yeah, to manage that anxiety and maintain a good mental health is so, so important to know what's happening.
Yeah, I've learned a lot of, or rather, I have a lot of resources now to look into for when I'm preparing for the next time. And I think my biggest thing, I'm actually working with my therapist on this, is trying to figure out like some of my core issues that caused so much anxiety and like what escalated it so much, because there's a big difference between discomfort and pain, and I think I was like in mental pain, you know, and I think about it and I'm like, well, if I can't feel anything, what's the big deal? I'm like, that was the big deal. Like, I couldn't for some reason get past this hurdle, and there was a lot of people that would say things like, oh, was it this or this or this, and I was like, I don't know. But so I hope through like being more educated, and people say, oh, the next time it might be easier. I don't know. Yeah. But I think information will be the biggest thing for me. And I am like all for that, for anybody. Like, I want to encourage anybody to learn what you can so that you can feel empowered in your pregnancy, because it's going to be scary as it is in certain aspects, but it doesn't have to be. And if it is scary, it's not your fault. It's just to prepare yourself, to give yourself enough.
Yep.
Whatever.
I think a good strategy that I used to cope with a lot of the issues I was dealing with related to anxiety was talking myself through, can I control this? If I think I can control this, I need to start compiling resources and making decisions. If I can't control this, I have to just say, I have to like own that. I have to own that there's nothing I can do, and I'm going to have to make it through this, right? Like, that is the only option, is make it through. So I can make it through and just torture myself, or I can make it through and do my best to find peace in that situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for tuning in this week. We appreciate you and your support as we share our lives and share aspects of parenthood that we encounter and aspects of parenthood that we would like to celebrate. For this week's recipe, Cody's going to share with us.
Okay, so for this week, this is called Best Ever Chicken Lettuce Wrap Recipe. So take that for what it is. And we like this in our house. It has been good. I find that now that Emmett's eating foods that we can eat, it's annoying for me to have something like steak where I have to cut it up separately. So things that have small things, like recipes that have vegetables already cut, like what I will be eating, I can just give to him. I'm not having to cut more things as we're cooking. I enjoy those a lot. So these are nice because you can just give him exactly what you're eating. And some of the ingredients you use, this is ground chicken. We just dice our chicken, garlic. There's a sauce that you make, hoisin sauce, amino acids, rice vinegar, sriracha, ginger. We don't use sriracha. And then you put water chestnuts in, green onions, red pepper flakes, salt and pepper and butter. And we added like a vegetable medley. So we did broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots in there as well. And we just really enjoy it. And then you wrap it in lettuce when it's done. So you have your kind of like chicken and vegetable mixture. You put it in the lettuce, you wrap it up, and you eat it. It's quick. It's not super messy, and Emmett loves it, and we love it. So.
What kind of lettuce do you use?
Oh, yeah. We just buy, what are they called? We use the long lettuce, not the big bulb of lettuce.
Romaine.
The romaine. Yeah, we use the romaine lettuce because they are kind of easier to make boats.
Oh,
the
cool.
big the big heads of lettuce.
Like iceberg?
Iceberg. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Cody, the grocery expert over here.
The one that's shaped like a ball versus the one that's shaped like a boat. The boat lettuce, they just hold together better and are kind of easier to make into a little burrito thing. So
We like to use butter lettuce for whenever we do lettuce wraps. And it's a very delicate leaf. So I don't know, like with all the vegetables and everything, it might be a little too delicate.
Yep.
But we do a couple of different recipes of wraps. And you have to, it's like one of the special lettuces. So it comes in like its plastic container. Kind of thing. But you can get 3 of them in a container at Costco and they're really cheap. But it is amazing flavor. Makes really good like cups.
Oh, we'll have to try.
Yeah.
We'll have to try that.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So be sure to catch our next episode where we'll have a guest talking about a father's perspective. And you can check us out at our website, partumthemess.com, and on Instagram and Twitter at partumthemess. And if you like our content and you'd like to become our patron and support the show, you can go to patreon.com/partumthemess. Thank you for listening.
And pardon the mess.
We're making memories.